Hello, my movie peeps. I just got done watching The Flash. And with The Flash, we follow the story of Barry Allen, who finds out he can travel into the past. With this superpower at his disposal, he figures he can go back in time and save his mother from dying, accidentally breaking the timeline and putting himself in a new reality. That's all pretty much. I'll give any spoilers to you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. We're gonna have to talk spoilers once this movie is finally released. But there are a couple of disclaimers off the top I gotta mention with this review. For one, this was an early screening that Warner Brothers put together where they got like thousands of fans all across the US to go see this movie. Hopefully you were one of the lucky few that got in, but there were people waiting in line for hours that were turned away. And before the actual movie got started, the WB rep holding the event let us know this is an unfinished cut of the movie. VFX might not be completely polished in this version. Some scenes might be removed, some scenes might be added in I didn't get to see. I know I'm definitely going to want to go back and watch the movie a couple of more times, so I'll tell you in my spoiler review if there was any differences in this version to the one that's officially released to the public. And also, there were no post-credit scenes shown at all in these screenings. Not even like I would mention what those were since it's a spoiler-free review, but Warner Bros. Is hiding these credit scenes, y'all. But okay, with those disclaimers out of the way, the freaking Flash movie, man. It is insane the behind-the-scenes drama that's gone on with this film over the past couple of years, even before stuff concerning Ezra Miller. This movie went through director after writer after director after writer, changing what the story was going to be for the DC universe until finally landing with Andy Muschietti as their director. Then because it was like ready to go right before the pandemic, it had to be delayed several times, and then in between its delays, its complications, the whole DC universe has basically gotten rebooted. We had a couple of new heads of the studios, one of them being James Gunn, who has a new idea for what to do in the universe. So like everything this movie was like supposed to do at one point is now kind of useless for its old universe. Like one of those things being setting up a solo Batgirl movie with Michael Keaton as the Batman. That got scrapped away for tax purposes, not gonna happen. Basically what I'm just trying to summarize here is this movie felt like it was always meant to fail. Like it was just no way they could have delivered a good product with everything it's been through the past couple of years. And it's why I'm shocked this film is phenomenal. Now, it's not a perfect movie, and it's definitely got its flaws and a couple of things we're going to definitely talk about, but man, this is a really solid Flash movie. I've been looking forward to the Flash finally having his own solo movie on the big screen. I can't believe it's taken so long. You think about all the other superheroes in the world that have gotten solo movies, and the Flash still wasn't one of them. I would think he is one of the legendary, most iconic, recognizable superheroes that didn't have a movie. And one of my main fears with going in to watch this Flash film is, you know, all the supporting characters. You had Michael Keaton Batman in there, who I was super excited to see part of this film. You also have Supergirl being thrown in there. You have Zod as a villain from Man of Steel also being part of this. It felt like, is this a Flash movie, or is this just like a random mix of DC characters featuring the Flash? Thankfully, watching the movie, this is a Flash story. Andy Muschietti here handled the balance of all these characters so well without letting that take away from Barry Allen's story. With all the different DC characters and surprise cameos that show up throughout the film, I never felt like it was really taking away from Barry Allen. It all just kind of felt like icing on a cake, extra toppings. I agreed with a lot of people when this movie was first announced and we found out it was going to be handling the Flashpoint Paradox storyline, because that's a big story in the Flash universe. Why would that be your first movie right out the gate? But the natural progression of that, following up with everything that was set up previously with all the other DCEU movies, it feels like the natural evolution for the Barry Allen character, and here he is given such a great arc. There were some aspects of Barry Allen in the previous DCEU movies that I wasn't always into, that I thought, oh, he's a little too goofy, a little too obnoxious, while other times thinking he is funny in the group. Definitely had one of the best moments in the Zack Snyder Justice League movie, and here we get to see a more mature version of Barry Allen that kind of comes face to face with the obnoxious side of Barry Allen, and we get to see how this character has grown from when we were first introduced to him. That was a part of the film I was not expecting, and is what kind of drives the emotional impact of this movie, because it has a lot of heart. The story of Barry Allen trying to save his mom and then coming to terms with what he has to do, it was some really riveting stuff. Getting on the subject of a lot of the other DC supporting characters in here, I'm excited for what James Gunn is going to do with the new DC universe, but for the first 10 to 15 minutes of this Flash movie, man, the DCEU never looked better. It felt like I was watching an episode of the Justice League Unlimited series back in the day. I grew up on that show, loving it, and here, all the clunky world building that has happened the past couple of years with the DCU, sometimes having a great movie, sometimes having a meh Batman movie, it felt like it was finally paying off in the first 15 minutes of this movie. You have the Flash just in Central City trying to get to work. Oh, but then Batman needs his help and they got to do a street level crime. It was all so in sync and finally made this world feel realized. I was like, it kind of sucks this universe is ending for whatever James Gunn wants to do next. Ben Affleck as Batman being in action one more time, both in and out of the suit, was so great to see. I'm gonna miss Ben so much. Michael Keaton's scenes in here, anybody who was telling you audiences are not excited or care about Michael Keaton's Batman, they are wrong. All the times my audience was clapping, cheering, and roaring all had to do with scenes with Michael Keaton's Batman. He is beloved, and for good reason. I grew up on the guy. He was my first movie Batman, and it was so cool seeing all his scenes. Obviously, the marketing are really hinging on like the nostalgic lines he's had from other movies, like, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. But really, all of that stuff is kept to a bare minimum in the movie. I don't think there is a lot of like nostalgia bait or references to old movies and going, hey, you remember this scene? In fact, I would argue between like Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, The Flash is the best multiverse comic book movie out there. Obviously, I'm always going to have a very special place in my heart for Spider-Man No Way Home because of the Spider People, and that's like my whole dang childhood. But in terms of like explaining the multiverse in the DC universe, how the timeline got messed up, even just the visualization of the Speed Force in here, I'm like, dang, this is really leaning into the comic book aspect of The Flash, and I love it all for it. Because while I'm not going to argue that The Flash is like the best movie DC's ever made, there is a real argument that The Flash is the best comic book movie ever made in the DC universe. And there is a clear distinction about that, okay? You look at something like The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan or Matt Reeves' The Batman. Those to me could be argued as some of the best movies that the DC universe has ever made. But those films also kind of strip away the comic book aspects of the character. They're grounded in realisms, they take realistic approach to the characters, which is all great and dandy. Love both of those movies, but The Flash here isn't afraid to lean into those comic book tropes, be slightly lighthearted while still having some of those grounded, serious moments. And just the way it tackled all these different characters coming in, it felt like you were flipping through the pages of a comic book in the best ways possible. Sasha Kaye, Supergirl in here, also one of the better parts of the movie. A lot of the action scenes she was given with Zod and in that big final battle were a lot of fun to watch. And it was also just really nice to see like my general audience of fans get into her character, because as much as we love Henry Cavill as Superman, this was just a nice different take on a super character. So yeah, before even getting into my negatives with this film, I genuinely had a fantastic time with this movie. I walked away so happy, so fulfilled, but also just like feeling so bad that there's so many negative things attached to this movie, that there's going to be people out there that don't even want to give it a chance, don't even want to look at it, be like, no, I can't support this film. And look, I respect that, but it's like, man, if everything behind the scenes went so positive with this movie, this would easily be one of the movies that people constantly reference about DC at their peak. But okay, getting into some of my negatives about the movie, a big chunk of them will have to do with the CGI of the film. Now, I mentioned earlier, this is an unfinished cut of the movie. Maybe the VFX aren't all the way done, but while there was a lot of scenes in The Flash that looked absolutely phenomenal, a lot of like the slow motion stuff with the Flash, some really cool zoom in molecule stuff that I was just geeking out about, there was like a good 60 to 50% of visual effects where the characters look like straight up PlayStation characters. Granted, like PS4 characters, so at least it was stunning graphics, but still faces looked rubbery, kind of like an uncanny valley feel. And although it wasn't a deal breaker, I think it's something that a lot of people are going to be noticing, like, man, this is like a really CGI heavy moment right now. Aside from that, a lot of my main negatives will be coming to the third act of the movie. Now, I'm not going to say the entire third act was like messy or bad, but there are a lot of elements in the third act where the movie, I wouldn't say falls apart, but you start to definitely see the cracks and go, everything was kind of so perfect until all of this started happening. Now, while I offhand mentioned earlier in this review that there are cameos and surprises, the movie isn't built on those. The cameos and surprises are basically all put in like one specific scene that like got the biggest roars and claps from my theater. A lot of those cameos and surprise reveals had me smiling really big. It also shows you how this Flash movie is really a celebration of everything DC, not just the DCEU or James Gunn's future DC universe, everything DC that has been in media the past like what 50-60 years, which I think is great. But within that same sequence, there is a villain that appears, and that's kind of appeared throughout the movie. Some of you guys know who I'm talking about. They've shown him in Funko Pops and other toys. You probably see them walking down your local Target. But in case you don't know about this villain in the film, I won't get into too much detail. But like, I was kind of intrigued, and there's definitely like a cool backstory with this villain. But as soon as they're introduced and revealed and we get that out of the way, they're kind of gotten rid of so fast. And that setup and buildup that you've had in the movie and mystery of like, who is this guy? It felt kind of uneventful, and like they just had to rush put away that because the movie was already so long. When I felt like that maybe could have been handled a little bit better. And that can really kind of be said for parts of the third act. A lot of it feels like rushed or messed with. And I can't help but to think if this is stuff with like James Gunn in the new DC universe, because he's mentioned he's gonna delete stuff that was promising and setting up things for what they once thought they were gonna do with the DCU. Like taking Black Adam, for instance. If James Gunn was in charge of the DC universe before Black Adam came out, he would have removed that Henry Cavill post-credit scene because he knew that was a false promise to the fans and he wasn't planning to bring Henry Cavill back. So it feels like there are some stuff missing in like the ending of this movie, or that maybe there was a setup here for a continuing universe and it just kind of ends and it feels a little contradictory and it doesn't like fully hit the ballpoint. But really, that's kind of about it. Just some messy things in the finale of the movie, along with the CGI looking a little questionable at times, but those are not deal breakers to me. There's a reason Warner Brothers was willing to show an unfinished cut to thousands of fans across the US, because they knew it was a good movie either way. This is definitely a movie I'm going to want to rewatch multiple times before it leaves the theaters, just because of how happy it made me. And I think a lot of the people willing to put the behind the scenes drama aside are just going to be so pleased with this film, especially Flash fans who have been dying for the Flash to be represented in movie form. They did it. All right, so with The Flash, I'm going to give action 4 stars here. Although the CGI can be questionable and not everything looks great, I still really enjoyed a lot of the action sequences in here, the slow motion takes, the focusing in on the different abilities the Flash can have, not to mention those Michael Keaton Batman scenes, because boy, it's still got it. Comedy in the movie, I'm going to give it 3 stars. I thought the humor was very well balanced in here. There was a lot of jokes that had me laughing up and down. Admittedly, there was one like super goofy scene at the beginning of the movie, kind of dealing with the Flash at a hospital. It felt like a red flag for what the movie was going to be, but we got past that scene and everything was fine. Drama in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I love that it actually focused on Barry Allen's arc, the tragic exploration for what it means to be a hero, how sometimes the things that affected us in our past is really who makes us who we are today, not taking that for granted. Really just like a classic comic book story told so well in live action form. Horror in the movie, I'll give like 0.5 star too, mainly for like that one villain that's peeping around. He looks kind of creepy throughout the movie, but like I said, he doesn't get to fully live in his moment by the end. Suspense in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I think there was definitely times where you're gonna be worrying for the heroes on screen, but kind of the fun, lighthearted nature of it knows that things will probably work out. Casual fans of The Flash, I'm gonna give this an A-. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it an A-. And critically, I'm going to give it a B+. For The Flash, I think this is one definitely worth adding to your collection at home.
That's a keeper. Yes.
In the end, guys, I think The Flash is a super crowd pleaser that a lot of people are going to enjoy, even with its faults and negatives. It'll probably never truly escape some of the headlines that were happening before the movies got released, but the fact that you could even come to enjoying it after all that, I think is still a pretty good miracle. Let me know what you guys thought about The Flash. If you were one of the lucky few that got to see it, let me know if you plan to go see it. I really can't wait to talk spoilers with you guys. Don't be forgetting to hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.